Hello, everybody. Good morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are. Just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining. I am going to start promptly because we only have half an hour and there's quite a lot of content to cover. So I do want to get started. To be honest, this session is largely following up from a number of other specific topic webinars we've ran before, where there's often been questions around how this might work in Veeva specifically. So I'm going to cover a lot of areas that we've covered in more detail in specific webinars. So I'm going to cover a lot of material in a short period of time, but obviously if you need any further details, please reach out. I'll kind of remind you of this as we go. Alp is going to put in the chat as well as we go a link to basically sort of book some time if you want to cover a specific topic as well. So I'll kind of remind you of that as we go through. But with that, I will get started. And again, as I say, this is really focused on how you can automate your submission content preparation, report generation, and other content-related activities for content stored in Veeva. Everything I show you will have a focus on Veeva, but everything is also possible in other repositories that you may be using in-house, such as SharePoint or Documentum or Kara, etc. as well. So as I say, we're focusing here on Veeva, but everything can work in other repositories too. So with that, I just got a quick intro to begin with, and then focus on the specific areas where content may be used, where it's stored in Veeva repositories, looking at the Microsoft Word content itself, and how you can automate some of that preparation even before it's maybe converted to PDF, some things you can do to automate some of that content preparation. Then look at sort of the creation of your renditions themselves for global use and how you can create multiple renditions simultaneously, potentially automatically. So look at how that can be achieved. Same thing, report generation. We're not talking publishing your submissions, but the creation of reports. And again, without using any publishing or report creation tools, how you can have reports generated fully automatically as well. Then look at how you can look at the PDFs that may be generated, validate them, check them against guidelines, ensure they're ready to be shared with the health authority or to be included into your submissions as well. We'll also look at some other use cases that you can use the platform for also, whether that may be migration, archival, etc. also at the end, as well as just drawing some conclusions. So with that, maybe just to begin with, often obviously what we look at, some of the current challenges, whether you're talking within a Veeva repository or any, in terms of that content prep, obviously just today it's typically very slow, largely because there's still a lot of manual steps involved, which obviously makes it quite resource intensive. You have a lot more people involved than you'd like, ideally. And again, anything that's manual introduces an element of risk in there as well for manual human error. And obviously often some complex tools are used. If you talk about report generation, you may be using some more complex tools that are intended for submission use, for example, to generate reports. So it's like a sledgehammer to crack a nut situation where you really don't need something that complex, but you're having to because that's the tools you have available. And obviously that then introduces an element of training or training burden to sort of deal with either large complex tools or multiple tools to achieve what you need in terms of your content preparation. So various kind of challenges, as again, not just specific to Veeva, but in any repository that you may need. As I say, not everything typically takes place in one area. So what I'm looking at obviously doing here is how with DocShifter, we have a platform that is focused on sort of generating for high volumes of content, kind of repurposing that content, sort of making it usable in another way for a different use case. So you may have content authored in one way in one tool, and it needs to be sort of transformed for use in a submission or whatever it may be across the enterprise. So we're really a software solution that really focuses on automating that conversion, but also the enrichment of that conversion and so on as well. So there's a lot of other things that same technology can be used for, and the workflow engine that surrounds that to connect to your repositories like Veeva automatically and perform a lot of tasks you may be doing manually, fully automatically today. So we'll have a look at this as we go. It's a platform that integrates with your repositories, whether that's Veeva Vault. You may still have SharePoint for collaboration, for example. You may still have legacy platforms as well. Ultimately can connect to any of them as well. So we'll have a look at that and look at some use cases where that multi-platform, that connectivity can play in as well. So obviously in this terms, it's really a platform focused on rendering, but there's a lot more you can do with the platform than just pure conversion to PDF. Often you think of rendering, it's just a tool used to convert documents into PDF files. And while that's an element of it, and it's not that straightforward an element if you're talking about submission content, ultimately there's a lot more that can be done with a tool like DocShifter to prepare, to help you automate some of those tasks that you're performing manually today. So really you're looking at taking content from one location, whether that's Veeva Vault or any other repository, in many different formats, converting it to PDF, but also potentially OCRing the content, applying headers, footers, watermarks, pagination, merging multiple pieces of content together or splitting them up to make sure they don't exceed file size limitations, etc. as well. Making sure you got detailed bookmarks and cover pages and tables of contents where you need them, applying or removing security depending on what you're doing, generating reports from multiple files, making sure it meets all the different health authority requirements as well. And potentially also introducing elements of validating content, your source content in Word or your PDF content as well. It can also be used for non-PDF related elements as well. So you may across the enterprise have other requirements to convert not only to PDF, but into other formats like XML, HTML, refreshing legacy content, such as doc or RTF files into docx, and image formats from one to another, video formats, audio formats, etc. as well. So it's not beyond just PDF as well. And I'll talk about some of those at the end. But really, we're going to look at some specific use cases where that matters. And really what we're looking at doing is using the workflow capabilities of DocShifter to help automate some tasks you may be performing in Veeva Vault today, or content stored in Veeva Vault today. So ultimately, we have a workbench where we can create multiple workflows with logic added to help you automate kind of how that content should be processed based on various criteria, the metadata you provide in Veeva Vault, to say if it's this type of document, I want to do this with it. This is how it should be processed. This is how it should be rendered. This is whether a TOC should be added or not, etc. So all of those things can be routed, and you can have different branches in the workflow depending on rules you built up. But again, fully automated rules. So all this happens in the background without any user interaction whatsoever. So we have this ability to create multiple workflows within your repositories to basically save you, in these, automate some of the repetitive tasks you're performing today. It's ultimately a drag and drop in terms of building these workflows that's set up in the background for you or with your teams to kind of define basically where the content is coming from, what you want to do with it, and where do you want the results to go. That may be completely within the Vault environment, input coming from Veeva, transforming it, doing whatever you need, and the results going back to Veeva. Or it could be input from Veeva and output going somewhere else into SharePoint or to your file shares, or the reverse, coming in from SharePoint, processing the file, and then storing the result in Veeva as well. So there's a lot of different ways this can work. But ultimately, the idea is you configure these workflows and you let them run in the background. It's not a tool the user interacts directly with. That happens automatically in the background within your life cycles as well. So with that, if I look at the one use case of the first use case of actually preparing Word content itself before you even begin any conversions, how you can help speed up the Word kind of authoring, if you like, the actual Word itself before you even begin any conversion. So we have a doc validator part of the platform, which is just something you can include in your workflows, a step that basically checks your Word document for issues, errors, either reports on them or actually automatically fixes them, and then either returns the report back into Veeva for you to look at and the author to update based on the results from the report, or it can return an actual fixed version of the document as well. So ultimately, these can integrate with your existing workflows, but ultimately we set the parameters, which checks do you want to perform, and in different types of documents, you may have different parameters you want to set, perform different checks, and different types of fixes depending on the type of content. And again, there's a whole series of those that you can go through. The report itself can be stored back in Vault as well. So in this case, I'm a very simple workflow on the left-hand side just to look for some content in Veeva based on, in this case, just based on the status. So I'm looking for content that reaches a status of ready to be processed. And when it reaches that status, that's when it should be picked up and sent to DocShifter to be processed, in this case, through the document validation. There's a whole series of criteria of which checks they want to perform. And then at the end, the results are stored back into Veeva Vault. In this case, I'm storing the results of this, the actual, in this case, the report telling me what issues it's found as a different type of rendition in Veeva Vault. So in this case, I'm going to just use the default imported rendition type to store the actual validation report for the Word document. So if you see that in practice, if you take Veeva Vault and you have a document, this is a very simple dummy document, clearly not a regulatory document. I'm talking about a DocShifter sample document here. They may have some issues with it. Ultimately, all I'm doing is I'm changing the status. Here I'm showing you in the screenshots just manually. Obviously, that could be part of an automated workflow. I set the workflow to be ready to be processed, set the status of that document to ready to be processed. It kind of picks that up. We process the file. We set it to a temporary status of in processing. So you can see that it's actually working at the time, and ultimately processed by DocShifter. So ultimately that file is then processed, validated with the criteria that you specified. And the results, in this case, I said I just wanted a report. I can see that's created as a imported rendition type. So I've got a PDF report showing me the results from these checks directly in Vault as well. And that report, basically, if you look at it and open it up, I'm just opening an Acrobat here. It basically summarizes the issues it's found. So it tells you what checks it performed, a summary of how many issues it found, how many checks passed, how many failed, how many individual items have failed, a summary of all the checks that were performed, and how many of each check, how many issues of each type it found, and how many were left unresolved because it couldn't be fixed. And then it goes through and breaks them down one by one and shows you exactly where each of the errors was found. So I'm not going to go through these in detail, but ultimately the summary report goes through in great detail through every single page, every single check you've asked it to run, and gives you a report telling you where it's found all of those errors. Again, I won't go through all the details, but that's one way of doing it, just reporting on it and allowing the author to make the fixes themselves. The other choice is to let it fix the content automatically. Not everything we report on can be fixed, but many things can. So in this case, I got, again, a very simple dummy document where I've got issues with headings. I may have padding spaces in the headings. I may have heading numbers out of sequence, watermarks remaining, empty paragraphs, comments still remaining, and images not in line, table issues, and so on. And ultimately, if you'd run it through the workflow and you'd set it with the options to fix rather than just generate a report, you then get a fixed version of the document returned back into Vault as well, or whichever repository you're working in. So again, in this case, it's just a simple, it's fixed the sequencing numbers, empty paragraphs have been resolved, tables have been kind of set to fit the page width, which kind of reduces the likelihood of font size issues. Images are set in line, etc. All the various fixes that you've applied. Okay. So again, very quick detour. Apologies for the motley crew in the photo. This was in one of our team meetings. Just wanted to say, if you do want to book a specific demo on this or any of the other topics, if you look in the chat, Alp's leaving a URL in there for you to follow up with us just to book a specific demo to talk about any of the specific points. So you could find it in the chat if you need. Moving on, if we look at the renditions themselves, so once we've got content and then we obviously want to convert it, while obviously there is the ability to render directly in Vault, for example, in some other repositories as well, you do have the cases where you may want to create simultaneous renditions, more than one as well. So you may take that one Word document that may need to be used in submissions in multiple regions as well. And while you can just take and create one PDF that suits the needs of multiple regions, you may at times need to have specific PDFs generated, even though the source document's the same, have different PDFs for different regions as well. So what we can do is create simultaneously PDFs that meet the needs of individual health authorities all at once, if need be. So in this case, I have the workflow where basically what I'm doing is I'm, again, monitoring the status within my Vault repository. And I'm then basically checking for each region that I want to, that I built the workflow for, and saying, should I create a Japanese rendition? Should I create a PDF that meets the European specs? Should I create one to meet the FDA? Should I create one for Swissmedic and for Health Canada? Which regions do I want a rendition for? And based on attributes from Vault or whatever repository, you're able to sort of say whether or not basically turn off or on the requirement or the need to render to that specification as well. So as long as you've got the attribute set in there, you can automatically have it create multiple renditions simultaneously. I could, in theory, here have 5 different renditions created. And again, the specifications, the details of how that should be done is obviously up to you. You could have slight differences for PMDA, where maybe their bookmarking is slightly different from the FDA. Now, the PDF version may be different and so on. While they're largely the same, there can be some nuances as well. So in this case, all I've done here is very simply leveraged metadata from my DMS and simply said this simple attribute called JP. If that value is set to true, then I want to create, then it will generate a PMDA compliant rendition. And the same thing for each of the countries, same thing, just a specific attribute off or on. That's just one way of achieving it. So again, attribute from your repository and just a value. Based on that, each route could have a different set of PDF criteria. How that PDF will be created for the PMDA, the options we set there can be slightly different from the FDA, which could be slightly different from Swissmedic or Health Canada or Saudi, etc., Australia. Each one could be slightly different. So that's basically what we do. We then point them to the configuration with the appropriate parameters for that region. And again, just to show you how that could look, again, involved to have a specific individual document here. I sort of changed this to be ready to be processed. Again, it gets picked up, ready to be processed, goes through in processing. In the end, says it's processed by DocShifter. And that can either be, for example, stored as a replacement to the rendition in Vault or as the rendition to begin with, or it could be a different rendition type, or it could be a completely separate object as well if you want. It doesn't have to be stored as a rendition. It could be generated as a separate PDF file that's categorized directly into Vault separately if you want. But again, the idea here is the rendition that's created is a truly health authority ready. It's fully compliant with the specs. It should need far less manipulation through the additional tools in Acrobat and Toolbox type applications to kind of finalize it for each region. The idea here is it's truly health authority ready. And again, if you want to see more detail about this, because again, I'm just scratching the surface here a little bit, just let us know with the link in the URL. So apologies, you're going to have to see our faces just a few times through this. In terms of report generation, so going beyond the individual documents themselves, really looking at reports where you're looking at merging multiple files together in some shape or form. What you're able to do here is really leverage things like concept of binders in Veeva Vault or zip files, for example. If you're talking outside of Veeva, you could be talking, virtual documents and so on as well. But ultimately, the idea is that you just create and define what content needs to go into the report, and that should be it. That's all you need to do is define the contents. And then the actual building of that report should be fully automated. And you could have different types of reports kind of specified in your workflow and say, well, if the type of binder is as a clinical report, then it will kind of create the report based on some criteria you've set up for the clinical route, in which case you may add a cover page, you may create the table of content in a specific way for the whole report, add specific pagination or headers and footers, and you may split it up into specific kind of blocks if you'd like at the end. Other types of reports may or may not have slightly different settings made. So you can see here 3 different routes depending on the type of report that's specified. So in this case, I have 3 routes. It would only take one of them. The idea here again is that you're really the only remaining step that would be manual or semi-manual is that creation of the binder itself to say what are the documents that make up this report. That's it, or in a zip file or whatever it may be. As they create that binder, and then once it reaches the right status again, the workflow kicks in, and the metadata that is pulled can be used at various stages in that automation. So it will pick up and create and take the correct route through the workflow based on the metadata. PDF files will be created for each document in the binder. Those PDF files will be merged together. Cover pages will be added appropriately. Headers and footers applied, including pagination. Tables of contents included. Watermarks added if you need. And then the final merged files might actually need to be split up if they're too large. And each PDF file that's generated will be completely compliant, ensure that everything is compliant to the health authority requirements you need. And then the results are stored, for example, back into Veeva. So again, that's kind of how you could sort of build reports automatically. Just concentrate on, the actual binder, the content, the rest of it, leveraging the metadata and the additional metadata that's available. You can automate an awful lot more of it as well. So again, in this case, I have a simple binder in Vault. I've just got simple sort of 6-7 documents in here in a simple binder. And again, all I'm doing here is manually setting, just to show you, setting the status to be ready to be processed. Excuse me. It goes through to in processing and eventually processed by DocShifter. Once that happens, we've then got, in this case, I've created that output as a separate object because there's no concept of a rendition to a binder. So I've created that as a separate object in here. So I've got a 2.6, my PDF file here. And I can then see that this this PDF has been created that's merged all the documents together. I maybe added my table of contents, my cover page on the first page, where it's pulled and applied metadata from the repository into the cover page, into the overlays on every page. I have bookmarks that span all the documents that have been included, etc. in there as well. You can also make sure there's a relationship. So while there's no concept of a rendition to a binder, we can at least create a relationship between the file that's created and the binder itself. So at least you're not searching for where the heck did this PDF come from. You can trace it back to the actual binder itself as well. And if you then look at the PDF that's created, it's ultimately, or PDFs, if it was a multi-volume report, you can see you've got my cover pages in here. I've got pagination. This is report level pagination rather than document pagination. Obviously, detailed bookmarks, tables of contents, obviously hyperlinked. All hyperlinks will continue to function in the report. And obviously all of your compliance requirements or technical requirements are there in terms of making sure your hyperlinks are inherit zoom, they're blue in color, your initial view settings are correct, etc. as well. All of that is taken care of fully automatically. Again, here we are again, please just follow the link in the URL in the chat if you want to discuss that in any more detail. So in terms of then the actual PDF checking, so once you have PDFs, you may want to validate, actually check that those PDFs meet specific requirements, making sure that you don't have any issues with bookmarks or hyperlinks, your initial page settings are correct, all your properties are set correctly, etc. as well. You don't exceed file size limitations and so on. So there's a whole series of checks that you can run automatically as well once you have PDFs, whether that's one or multiple, whatever it may be. So again, various checks we can make, related to your bookmarks, hyperlinks, fonts, making sure that all the fonts that are used have been embedded correctly, text-based issues, page-related issues, annotations, security issues, etc. All of those things can be checked. And again, in the middle, there's a simple workflow. There's just showing monitoring a Vault repository and just basically kicking off, once it reaches a specific status, kicks off a PDF validation, validates the PDF and returns either a report that shows you the issues that it's found. And if it finds any issues, you can tell it if a specific thing fails to actually process the PDF file again to fix it. So if you got the wrong PDF version, that can be processed and fixed automatically. If your hyperlinks are the wrong color, you can tell it, well, if these things are wrong, then process it again to fix that also. So it's possible to fix a lot of the things that it reports on, just as it can do in Word. So again, you don't have to run all the checks. You can tell it in which situations you want to run which checks. So you could have a lot of checks performed for some types of documents and perhaps fewer in other instances as well. So in this case, I want to sort of check that all my fonts used have been embedded. I've got hyperlinks are all blued, etc., and so on. So I can define what checks to run. So in this case, the results are a report or potentially a fixed file. And again, very similar to the Word validation, I have a report summarizing the findings, how many tests it ran, how many issues it found, your checklist of checks, telling you all the checks that you told it to run, whether it passed or failed each of those checks. I can see the PDF version isn't correct, past web view isn't set. Apologies, the text here is very small, but it's passed a lot of them, some of them are not available, etc. as well. So a quick summary to begin with, pass or fail, your checklist, and then the detail afterwards telling you where exactly those errors were found. Some of them are quite easy. It was PDF version 1.4, but I wanted 1.7. Optimizing isn't on. It tells you which fonts weren't embedded correctly, which bookmarks have issues, which hyperlinks have issues, or perhaps they're not the right color, and what page do they appear on, etc. So again, a quick summary PDF for that. Again, if you want to see any of that in action or see that, talk about it in more detail, please, again, just let us know. Again, I'm covering things pretty high level here to begin with. Some other specific use cases as well. So beyond those, again, here we're focused very much on, we focused a little bit on the creation of PDFs with PDF Plus. We've looked at document validation and PDF validation. We've looked at the generation of reports. I briefly mentioned at the beginning that we don't only do sort of PDF creation, we can also output to other formats. So if you're looking for file format preservation, updating legacy content into more modern formats that can continue to be edited, like DocX or XLSX from older formats, you can also do that. You'll also be able to convert from PDF back to Word, for example. You lose some things, but you can go from PDF to Word or PDF to Excel as well. You can convert audio and video formats, etc. as well, CAD diagrams and so on also. So there's various things we can do beyond just creating PDFs as well. There's also the ability to kind of connect directly to your email repositories to track correspondences coming in from the health authorities or internally, and ensuring that the emails themselves are captured somewhere, converted into readable formats, along with any attachments, and stored wherever, whether that's in Veeva repositories or some elsewhere as well. You can really kind of process those emails automatically as well. And we'll look at insights a little bit as just a way of checking and monitoring how much usage your system is getting, as well, how much you're processing content and so on. If you're a service company, service provider, you can easily see for each client how much they're actually using the platform as well as OCR abilities, etc. also. So just to kind of show you a couple of use cases, additional use cases for that, if we look at this one workflow that I've created, it's for migration of content. Really here, I'm looking at taking, in this case, my starting point isn't Veeva. The starting point here is SharePoint. So I'm monitoring a location in SharePoint for content that needs to be migrated, for example, into Veeva. And this could be done in any different routes for the supported repositories. So I'm monitoring that location for SharePoint content. And then depending on the type of file, I might do different things with it. So I'm looking here at, based on the content type, I'm either going to send the content directly into Veeva, categorize it directly into Veeva somewhere with some categorization that may need further categorization once you're in there. If it's a CAD diagram, I may just convert it to PDF and then store the PDF in Veeva, even though the source was SharePoint. We may say, well, I want a readable, human readable version of that CAD diagram to be stored in Veeva Vault. You may have your video formats, which are becoming a little bit more usable, from any video format into maybe a standard MP4 format, and those MP4s are stored in Vault. Or you may also want to use it for archive preparation as well. So if you're looking to create archive-ready, longer-term archival format is often PDF-A. You can convert to PDF-A format and store that PDF-A format in this case, into Veeva Vault as well, or whatever archive platform you're using. So again, in from one format, in from one repository, out to another. That can help you with migration, can help you with things like archival, etc. as well. And again, the insights is just your ability to view the usage, kind of monitor over time how much the platform is being used, what kind of content are you using, and kind of analyzing how large the content is, the content type, which groups are kind of using the system more than others, etc. as well as identifying font usage, times of day when the system might be used more than others. So you only have to keep these hosting environments open and running for the amount of time that they're actually really truly used. So with that, again, just going back to the original challenges, ultimately what we're looking at doing is really attacking a lot of the challenges that you potentially face today. Really that slowness, if you like, that's caused by manual processes and the resource intensiveness of that. Really, we're able to sort of tackle that by automating things a lot more, which just by default reduces the risk because you're taking any human error out of the equation. And again, you then using large complex tools to perform relatively simple tasks in things like report generation as well. So again, our whole idea, whole concept is really trying to save you time through further automation, leveraging tools that you have, platforms you have, like DocShifter is a rendering tool that every organization like yourselves will need at some point, but just leveraging that capability to perform other tasks fully automatically. Now, I know Alp has been leaving a URL in the chat, for some time. Just wrapping up here, pretty much smack on time. I know Alp has a poll question just to pull up as well, very briefly. Basically, just kind of asking the same thing if you want to be contacted for anything, for any more details. But of course, also use the URL that was sent if need be. And we can also reach back out to you that way as well. So obviously, if anybody has any questions or placed any questions, I will follow up with those following the session. But I want to thank everybody for their time. Apologies, this is very quick, but hopefully we'll speak to some of you again in some more detail. But thank you, everybody, and have a good evening or rest of the day, wherever you are. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.